speeding through the streets, kids will less likely to be hit by a car, and whether they're walking or they're on a bike. So that's what it really comes down to. That simple.
Great. I'm just going to touch on the quick follow-up because I know this was like a two-part question. So I guess to expand on that, what we as the organization, as Safe Streets, would like to know is to what extent traffic safety education is being taught in our schools and at which levels of education, because we are finding that a lot of behavior is shaped early in that. Now, of course, also, children will react to their environment. So if they don't feel safe in their environment, it's all intertwined. But I think it would be helpful for us to look at the education piece. So is that something that you would tackle with the school board to dive in and see what is their curriculum and what grades it's being taught at? Mr. Phillip?
But whether or not,
Go ahead.
Okay, do you want to go? Traffic, whether or not kids are being taught about traffic safety.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know. We see Board of Ed candidate out there. Maybe they could tell us. But I have no idea. My guess is it's not. And I think it would make. I don't think you need a class, a full-time class on it. But
No.
maybe it works in some element of it. I'd love to see kids being taught about civics, which would include local government, which you can have an element of it being about, traffic safety. So
Sure. Great.
Yeah, I would echo those sentiments. I couldn't tell you what's the curriculum per se in any of the given schools, and nor does that fall directly under our responsibility for mayor or council. I can tell you that I work very closely with Dr. Lyles and those school board members, and we meet regularly, as I touched on some of the safe routes that we're working on. That said, going back to the curriculum question, I couldn't tell you that, but I do think it's more than just the schools relying on the schools. It's parents also teaching their kids, basic rules as it relates to traffic navigation and what's going on the streets there. So it's a combination of both, but I continue to have a good relationship with the school board, and we're going to continue to work together on solving some of these problems.
Great. Thank you both. Turn it back over to Patrick.
You guys have both mentioned it, so now we're going to talk about it, is Grand Street. Over the past 8 years, Bike JC has advocated for safer and more accessible cycling in Jersey City. We looked at many of our dangerous roads, and Grand Street stood out because of its poor safety record, and also because it connects so many neighborhoods. It's such an artery. It runs from Arlington Park at the beginning of Ocean Avenue all the way down through Paulus Hook to the waterfront. Grand Street, therefore, is a backbone of transportation that everyone wants to use. However, its design is more like a highway than a local road, and it's like a local road through densely populated city surrounded by residential, commercial, recreational, and educational facilities. So Bike JC, we actually went out and we bought a speed gun so that we could go down there on Grand Street and see how fast the cars are going on Grand Street. And we did this a bunch of times from different spots on the street. And what we found out was that the average speed was about 35 to 40 miles an hour on Grand Street. Citywide speed limit, 25, right? 25, everybody knows that. So 35 to 40 miles per hour was the average. We also had peaks, people going 56, 57, 58 miles an hour on Grand Street. That's highway, that's turnpike speed, right? So part of what we want to see will be, some improvements in these designs will include a center turning lane that will keep traffic flowing in a more orderly and efficient manner, as well as providing an open lane down the middle of the road to allow emergency vehicles to get to their destinations more quickly. People are really scared about this when they talk about road diets, but part of the road diet allows a center turning lane. It provides for a center turning lane, and that provides space for emergency vehicles. And we know the Jersey City Medical Center is on Grand Street, so we want to make sure that ambulances can get in and out, get to where they need, get to the hospital quickly. The road diet provides for that. There's also possibilities for pedestrian safety improvements, protected bike lanes that we talked about, and improved mass transit as well. It's all being evaluated right now. So the question is, and Mr. Matsakoudas, if you could answer first, please, and we're going to give you 3 minutes on this one. So do you support the Grand Street vision? Please be specific about what you support or any concerns that you have. And will you commit to fully implementing the Grand Street vision? How will you ensure that the city's eventual plan for Grand Street is swift, bold, and comprehensive, and not watered down into a patchwork of compromised, a compromised patchwork that's, shouted down by loud opponents of this plan? So, go for it.
Thanks. I think I haven't changed my mind since I pointed it out a little earlier. As you mentioned, I do think Grand Street is the perfect opportunity for a complete street. The fact that there's not only a hospital there, but that there's a school, right? And when you point out those high speeds, and I live on Grand Street, so that's really frightening. And I know somebody who was killed on Grand Street. So to me, it's an absolute imperative. I think the road diet is one element to bring down the lanes. I think the protected bike lane is another one. I don't contend that I don't know if I don't think you have a full vision yet about the other elements of it. If there is one, I don't know it all, but. So if I was mayor, I would say, where do we stand on this? There should be certainly public meetings. Everyone should have their say. And the community groups going from Arlington Park, as you point out, down to Paulus Hook. And I think incidentally, I think the protected bike lane could go for the whole way down, even when you get down into the 2-lane area. That was one of my thoughts at first, was like, oh, maybe you're going to have to stop the protected bike lane when you get down east of Grand Street. But if you look at the width of the road there, from what I understand, you could probably accomplish it. So once you have a concept, a plan, how do you build things out? I've been part of it. I've seen it done, and you do it, right? You prepare bids, you hire an architect or whatever, you prepare bid specs, and then you go out to bid, and then you build it, right? And you could probably put it in the capital budget and bond for it. And unless it came back at some ungodly number, which I think would be impossibility, right? I think it's something very, very doable, easily accomplished within certainly less than 2 years' time. It should be a year to get it done. All of those things, 18 months at the longest, I would think. So that's my answer.
So I touched on this a little earlier as well, and we've had many meetings on this. We've indicated to Bike JC that it's funded, it's a commitment of ours, and they've actually given timelines, I believe, as far as when they're starting next year and when they're moving forward. So I have a 100% commitment to moving that forward. We've already conveyed that, and it's already happening. So in many ways, we're beyond that. And even when the city council received a couple months ago, I believe, hundreds of emails from people against this, we still spoke to leadership at Bike JC and said that we are going to move forward. We're sticking with the commitment in order to expand protected bike lanes. And not only on Grand Street, there are other streets in conversation as well, which I think is important because, one thing that I've learned also in the last 4 years is that any time that you do one thing for one part of the city, there's other areas that feel neglected. So it's important that you think about a plan that includes other parts of the city that you could start building out simultaneously as we do that first part. A lot of areas of the city that feel that they are separated from the mass transportation area. I just know personally, and I've indicated this to our traffic and engineering department as they move forward, that if you build only Grand Street as a protected bike lane, it is going to be a problem because it's going to only exacerbate the perception that one area of the city is getting more than the other areas. So if we're committed to it, we need to be committed to it on a larger scale where we're testing it out and trying it in areas broader than that. So the short answer is that we are committed to it. Not only are we committed to it from saying it here, but it is happening. We've worked with them on it. It is moving forward. There are timetables that have already been given on it. But I think it's a larger conversation beyond just Grand Street and that small little corridor on how that works. Now, finally, I was a council person down there once upon a time, and so I have a great deal of familiarity also with Grand Street, not only living in that area, but also as a council person, because one of the initial things that I tried to do was to return the parking there to use it as a traffic calming mechanism. And clearly it wasn't a successful situation because I'm not a traffic engineer. My point on that is that I certainly recognize the problem that exists, and we're committed to solving it not only there, we're committed to doing it on a broader scale.
Thank you both. On that subject, real quick, as Mayor Fulop talked about, they are working on this. There's a company that's been hired that's studying Grand Street, and they've made some proposals, some plans, and we have some flyers in the back of the room on your way out. If you could grab one, where they're going to be doing a workshop where they're going to be showing those plans, where you can come down and look at what the proposals are and kind of put your 2 cents in there. So we hope that you take a flyer on your way out.
And as Patrick stated about Grand Street Vision Project, we do want community input. If you're not sure what it is, or you think you might not want it, come talk with us and share your concerns, because it's not just protected bike lane. It's to, as Patrick touched on earlier, it's improving pedestrian access and safety with a protective barrier. It's expanding sidewalks potentially in certain areas. It is making it easier for emergency service vehicles to access the hospital through the center turning lane, which could be used by them to get through traffic to get to the hospital quicker. So there's actually a lot of vehicular efficiencies too that will be achieved like this, which I know at first might seem a little counterintuitive when you hear the word road diet. But please come and talk with us and share your concerns, ask questions, and that's what the public process is for. So I just want to encourage anyone in the room who is perhaps not sure about it or is not in favor to please engage, because I think you might be surprised by what you learn. We hope that you would find it very interesting and very helpful for the city. It's a high crash rate road. So, and we don't want any more, and through both wards that it touches, and we just don't want anyone else to get hurt anymore. Okay, great, thank you. Courtney, for the slides, forgive me, I'm going to skip the next one for now and go to question 11. Yes, thank you, and then we'll jump back to 10. Thank you so much. So I'm going to take the next question. So, gentlemen, we've already heard about, can you go back one slide, please? Thank you. Yes, thank you so much. So here we'd like to talk about traffic enforcement. So we've already heard a lot of great things from both of you, which we appreciate the thoughtfulness and the degree of your answers and commitments that you've given us. But there's really one missing piece that we haven't talked a lot about yet that we'll talk about now. Designing safer streets is great, and it definitely should be our common best practice, from small things that can be implemented to bigger, large-scale projects. But that takes time. Even the best streets are safer when people obey traffic laws. So Jersey City, for decades, has had this anything goes culture of dangerous behavior on the roadways from drivers, bicyclists, and pedestrians. So if people basically know there's little chance of getting a ticket, there is little to curb on speeding, double parking on busy streets, and all other forms of dangerous behavior. Now, we know that stepped up enforcement on Kennedy Boulevard has helped reduce speeds there. We had the speed measurements. It's proof of concept, which is great. Enforcement also educates individuals that speeding, double parking, etc. can be costly. And enforcement is highly visible, since many others see someone getting a ticket when they are written. One car is pulled over and maybe 100 different cars see what's happening there. So basically, also the last thing about traffic enforcement that's helpful secondarily is it can act as a deterrent for other criminal activities. And then the last thing that I heard someone say at a Complete Streets conference that was pretty true but pretty funny is that criminals drive pretty badly. So it's true, and our police officers are trained when making traffic stops to look for any other outstanding criminal activity, warrants, drugs, guns, other things that might be a danger to our society. And it also gives a visual presence of our officers in our communities when we do increase this. At our Safe Streets meeting last December, Mayor Fulop announced the formation of a 5-officer traffic safety unit and committed to expanding it. That unit so far was committed to Kennedy Boulevard, and at the December meeting, the mayor committed to expanding it in size and resources so that it can respond to problem areas citywide. Yet, at a follow-up meeting this spring, when asked about the progress on the expansion, Director Shea stated that there were no plans to expand the unit beyond its original size, which is 4 to 5 officers on weekday patrol only on Kennedy Boulevard. So here's the question, gentlemen. Well, actually, before I dive into the question, I'd like to just highlight this slide, which I believe one of you touched on earlier. This is so very true, and it's also changed how I drive. Really, there's such a difference between just 10 miles an hour on the fatality probability of a car impacting a person. It's huge. I mean, even between 30 and 40, it's giant. You see the red people? Those are people that don't live. So even though 25 miles an hour might feel a little slow when you're driving, it's important, and it's set at that rate because of this impact and death probability. So I think the more that we understand that, the more we can be aware of our driving. But it's something that we need to make sure that everyone passing through Jersey City and who lives in Jersey City and drives is highly aware of. So here's the question. We will ask Mr. Matsakoutis first, followed by Mr. Fulop, with 2 minutes to answer, please. What will it take to get more traffic safety enforcement? How can police resources make a difference on problem streets and intersections, not just on Kennedy Boulevard? With the police department that has grown beyond expectations and whose numbers are well over 900 now, which is fantastic, will you increase the number of officers assigned to the traffic safety unit, expand the unit citywide, and when can that occur? Mr. Matsakoutis.
So the answer to that is multifold. One thing is yes, we need to have better enforcement, and we can do that by having more traffic safety police officers. But the other thing is changing the mindset of the police department and making them recognize that if they can give a ticket, because. Look, I could tell you, as someone who's lived most of my life here and had a brother who was a Jersey City cop for 25 years, I think the thinking was in the old days we got a lot more, more important things to worry about. There's people shooting themselves, and some of that is true. But when you look back and say, "But wait a second, people are dying from people going too fast." So, you pointed out that there was 585 people hit by pedestrians, hit by cars. And there's shootings. They're both serious is the point. So it shouldn't have to just be traffic safety people that, or traffic safety division, if you will, that is enforcing the speed laws. Other cops can and should do it as well. So if they see somebody going 40 miles per hour down Grand Street, Montgomery Street, West Side Avenue, 440, many of the other streets where you see people speed, they have to spend a few minutes, pull them over, and give them a ticket. And like you said, it will be deterrent. One thing that's no longer here anymore, I might have been one of the few people who thought it was a good thing, was the red light cameras. Because I'll tell you what, I was a lot less likely. I changed from that too, because I was less likely to go through these yellow lights. And if you have people. If people are watching your speed on a regular basis and giving out tickets, guess what? People will speed less. So the answer is yes. Both the traffic transportation, but also tell the police they have to give more tickets.
Great, thank you. Mr. Fulop?
I hated those traffic, those lights. I'll tell you, those red lights. Yeah.
I live by 2 of them. They worked.
Yeah. So let me start by saying thank you to Kara and Paul, who deserve credit on this. A year ago, we started a enforcement division on Kennedy Boulevard. And it was a byproduct of a community meeting very similar to this. And we made a commitment, and we've written thousands of tickets on Kennedy Boulevard with the goal of changing the culture there. And I think, as Kara mentioned, you look back a couple months afterwards and you could see real, tangible results. Subsequent to that, the question was posed, hey, can we expand that more significantly throughout the entire city? And my knee-jerk reaction was, of course, I'd love to do that. That would be a great thing. At the time after that was referenced, the police director thought that from a resource standpoint, that we couldn't expand it to the point that we could have covered every part of the city to a point that we thought it made sense and was fair across the city. So we recalibrated that. Where we are today, we've grown the department from 769 officers to 930 officers. So we've done significant growth, but it should have been there before. It isn't additional officers, it's officers that weren't hired that probably should have been hired already. So as we look forward to next year, my goal is to expand traffic enforcement. I think that's why we're both here, to figure out solutions towards that. Can I tell you unequivocally here, without the public safety director signing off, that I could commit 5 cars, 10 cars, 2 cars, 3 cars? I'd be disingenuous if I told you that I could. But what I can tell you is that we're committed to it. And as we expand the police department, we have 2 more classes coming in the near term. Our goal is to actually enact this citywide, and that's my hope.
Great, thank you. A quick follow-up to that. Just a quick follow-up to that. In terms of expanding enforcement, one of the biggest issues that we are seeing is lack of traffic enforcement in the nighttime, overnight, and weeknight hours. So that's something that we also need considered as part of this expansion. Is that something that you can work to achieve as well, Mr. Matsakoudas?
You want to know if we can do more nighttime enforcement? I think that absolutely. Look, you talked about an ancillary benefit, if you will, of traffic enforcement is maybe getting some people who are engaged in other crimes, if you will, or violations of the law that are more severe than speeding. And they tend to be driving at night. So, yeah, I think that makes absolutely good sense. You also have a lot of impaired drivers at night, intoxicated drivers. And we all know the harm that they can wreak. So, yes.
Great, thank you. Mr. Phillip.
Yeah. One thing I did 4 years ago was redistribute the police officers throughout the city so that it wasn't equal throughout the city. And the reason was because if you took a step back and you said, should I have the equal amount of officers in downtown as I should have, let's say, in Greenville at night, the political answer is, yeah, everybody's a taxpayer. You should have equal. If you're looking to solve the problems in the city, the short answer is no. You're going to allocate those officers to where the challenges are. And that's the right and fair thing to do. And that's what we've done, essentially. Now, that poses a problem as it relates to the enforcement because on traffic issues, because as we allocated additional officers to the problem or challenging areas, particularly the South and the West districts, those officers at night are very, very busy. Very busy. And they're doing a terrific job. You see it actually in all the data that they are driving crime in the positive direction downward, but they got a lot of work to do. So what you inevitably see is that they might pull somebody over and walk up to the car and they'll get a call immediately that I need you on this street or we need somebody else over here. And that happens constantly on a shift. So as we staff additional officers, we try to prioritize based on what the needs are ultimately. This is important, don't get me wrong. And as I said earlier, as we grow, we have a commitment to doing this, but I don't want to misrepresent why it hasn't been done or why it will be done. Just want to make clear on why we've made the decisions we've made up till now. Okay,
thank you. Yeah, and I hope that person that they had to walk away from didn't have warrants or a gun in their car. As you said, it's a lot of, and I know both of you said that they're being pulled in a lot of directions, but I think as we look at the staffing going forward, we should consider those extra resources on those shifts, but making traffic enforcement part of their mandate because of, not just to keep our streets safer, which is crucial for speeding, but also to to look for those other elements that might be happening with those people that are driving in that manner. The other thing, which you both touched on, but I also want to reemphasize, is that we do have a serious problem with a growing problem actually with our booming restaurant district downtown, which is great for the neighborhood and great for our economy. It is terrible for our drunk driving problem. It has been an issue that the downtown neighborhood groups have been telling us about for the last year and a half. They can even tell you what streets and corners those drivers are on. I mean, we have data we can hand the police, and I believe that they've made this known at community meetings, where these hotspots are, the hours, the days. You know, we know it's like Thursday through Sunday from, 11 to 3, or, we know the windows to use those resources smartly. So those are areas where we would need our next mayor to really commit to getting something done about those chronic hotspots in our city. Great, thank you. Great, at this time, I would like to invite up some guests in our audience who, unfortunately, have lost loved ones to traffic fatalities. I'd like to introduce the Cliffords and our other family members that are in. If you can please join us. Not sure who else is here. Is Jermaine here? Great. Yes, sir, please. Thanks, Ken. And thank you all for coming. We appreciate it. Turn it over to Tracy.
Thank you. I'm Tracy Clifford. Behind the statistics are people, sons, daughters, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, friends, neighbors, and coworkers. Now, we've crescendoed a little bit here with your speed analysis and that poster, and I divert for 10 seconds. If I could see that poster in high schools, whether mayors have curriculum duties or not with our education system, that would be a great idea. Because our son didn't die at the hands of a driver going 30 miles an hour or 40 miles an hour. He was in excess of 60 miles an hour on Kennedy Boulevard. So we are here because each of us has had a family member killed in crashes. We are here because we do not want anyone else to go through the pain of losing a loved one. Mr. Phillip, and then Mr. Matsakousis, will you make crash reduction a top priority and commit your administration to a vision of zero, that's capitalized, zero traffic deaths? And will you develop a plan to aggressively reduce the number and severity of crashes by focusing on known problems identified by crash data and the community complaints? Thank you.
For
2 minutes on this.
Yeah, it shouldn't take 2 minutes because I think we covered a lot of that. But first, let me express my condolences on your loss. I've met many of you before in different circumstances, and I'm sure it doesn't get any easier being in this sort of environment talking about it.